Lately, there's been a fair amount of discussion on the internet regarding 90s American Sonic and the various changes made to the character in the West, from his design to his story. Some people love this version of the character, while others hate him. One particular video that falls into the latter category is Pariah695's Why I Dislike 90s American Sonic. In this video, they discuss their vehement distaste for the changes made to Sonic in the 90s for the West, claiming them as disrespectful to the work of the original creators, and even lamenting the fact that elements such as chili dogs and the name Robotnik are now part of the game canon. No offense to Pariah, I've watched their stuff before and most of it is pretty good, but that being said, I'm not a very big fan of this take, particularly the notion that American Sonic is an insult to Sonic's creators. The real story is far more complicated than that, and I'll explain why. Act 1. Why was there two Sonics in the first place? It's no secret that Sega of America and Sega of Japan had a very rocky relationship in the early 90s. Communication between the two branches ranged from very poor to straight up non-existent, so it's no surprise that Sonic ended up being so different in the West. But even then, there's still a bit more to discuss. It is true that a factor in the change was standard corporate meddling on SOA's end. Mark Cerny, who often had to act as the middleman between the two branches, stated that Sega of America initially hated the design, and was even planning on educating Sega of Japan on what makes a good character design. Then the game came out, sold like hotcakes, and the executives promptly shut their mouths. Either way, still not a very good look on SOA's part, but I find it interesting that Cerny never specifies who told this to him. He just attributes it to SOA as a whole. In a different interview, Al Nelson, the head of marketing for Sega of America at the time, did state that he was hesitant about Sonic's design at first. Quote, "I was presented with two colored boards. The first was this egg-shaped character, which I felt in the US would be very preschool. And then there was a hedgehog. A blue hedgehog. It was like, what's a hedgehog? He had a band, a rock band, and he had a human girlfriend who looked like Marilyn Monroe and was named Madonna. These were the two choices I had, and I chose Sonic because it was the lesser of two evils. I had no gameplay or anything like that. Fast forward 9 months. I had heard nothing about it since, and I was in Sega R&D in Japan, and from across the room I see two monitors. On the first monitor was this wireframe with something spinning at super speed. I walk up and it's like, here's this character in a ball, spinning. But all it was a wireframe of, I don't know, Green Hill Zone? But I was like, I have never seen a game like this before and the speed was amazing. Then they stopped it and it was Sonic, that thing I had seen 6 to 9 months before. I just fell in love with it. While it's unlikely that Nelson was the person Cerny was talking about, it's still worth noting how, even when he wasn't a fan of the character, his opinions were much less extreme than whoever Cerny was talking about. But that's all in regards to the design. What about the story? What about that weird Sonic Bible that gave Sonic a completely different Western origin? Well, according to Dean Fitton, the guy who wrote the Bible and also came up with the name Robotnik, Sega of America wasn't even given a proper backstory for Sonic from the Japanese branch. When I said the communication between the two branches was often non-existent, I meant it. If what Fitton says is true, then they kinda had no choice but to make stuff up. But I'm not here to discuss whether these changes are good or not. I'm here to answer whether or not they can, in good faith, be considered disrespectful, and everything I've said so far is from the perspective of Sega of America. How did Sega of Japan feel about the whole thing? Act 2. How Sega of Japan felt about the whole thing. Yasashi Yamaguchi, the creator of Tales, has made a few statements about the relations between the two Sega branches, albeit not very positive things. First of all, he originally wanted the character to just be named Miles Prower, but Nelson, as well as senior product manager Madeline Schroeder, convinced Naka and the rest of the team to change it to Tails. Yamaguchi wasn't very happy about this, but he and the team eventually formed a compromise by making Miles his real name and Tails his nickname. But what about Sonic? What about old Mohawk over here? How did Sega of Japan feel about him? Well, according to Yamaguchi, the Japanese branch wasn't all too big on this take of the character. They would often make requests such as asking for him to have the correct number of fingers, or for his legs to be straight instead of bent, which Sega of America ignored. However, he also admits that Sega of Japan didn't have the resources to properly manage how their characters were handled until around the time Sonic CD was wrapping up development. So far, this all seems like pretty damning evidence against American Sonic. He was seemingly made because Sega of America execs didn't like the original design, and the people over at Sega of Japan weren't fans of what America came up with. Sure, there were instances of Sega of Japan failing to communicate with the American branch, but even when they did, it's not like Sega of America listened. However, there's one very important person that I haven't mentioned yet. How does Naruto Shima, you know, the guy who created Sonic, feel about the American design? Well, as it turns out, not only is he not upset about the existence of the Western design, he's even a fan of it, going as far as to own a piece of SatAM material. All this corporate drama and executive meddling, and all the while the guy who made the character and was supposedly being disrespected by Sega of America simply doesn't care, and is all for this alternate take on his creation. As a matter of fact, there's something else I noticed while doing research, though this is all just speculation on my part. During Sonic Adventure's development, various artists at Sega pitched their own redesigns for Sonic, one of which being done by Oshima himself. Now I don't know if it's just me, but doesn't this design kinda look similar to Greg Martin's? I mean, the way the spines are shaped, the proportions of the face, the ears and eyebrows. I can't be the only one who sees this, right? Now I'm not saying definitively that Oshima took inspiration from Greg Martin's Sonic, but given his positive opinions on the design, I wouldn't be surprised if he did. Act 3. The point. One question in particular I wanted to answer with this video is, do the intentions behind the company changing a creator's work matter more than how said creator feels about those changes? Personally, I'd say the answer is no. Even if Oshima is completely unaware that SOA executives supposedly hated his original design at first, that doesn't change the fact that he still likes what they came up with. And furthermore, there's the fact that elements of the Western canon got incorporated into the game canon at all. I haven't really talked about Yuji Naka in this video, since his contributions to Sonic's creation were more so in regards to gameplay and coding, but there does exist an interview where he himself acknowledges Robotnik as Eggman's real name. In addition, the first mention of chili dogs in regards to the game canon was in a Japanese strategy guide for Sonic Advance 3, a game he was a producer for. So there's little evidence to suggest that he felt Western Sonic was disrespectful to his team's work. Thus, in my opinion, these changes cannot, in good faith, be considered disrespectful, because if Sonic's creators don't feel like their work was disrespected, then there's no real point in making such claims. Why bother defending someone if they don't need it? To wrap this all up, I will say that I can understand where Pariah is coming from. Western Sonic is very different from the Japanese team's original vision, and I can imagine that, for someone who is as passionate about the Japanese canon as they are, it can be frustrating to see so many people believe that the Western canon is the true one. They are perfectly entitled to their opinion, but if they're willing to claim that the decision to westernize Sonic was disrespectful, it stands to reason that they should acknowledge that neither of his creators feel this way towards the westernized version of him. Oshima clearly likes this version of the character, and Naka was there to approve the integration of Western elements into the global canon. Any form of disrespect that may have been present at any point is long gone now. Hi, if you've made it here to the end, thank you so much. This is my first time writing a scripted discussion video like this, so I apologize if my delivery or writing was weak. I know my mic isn't very good, and my lisp can make my voice a little hard to understand at times. But hopefully it wasn't too bad here. I don't plan on making these kinds of videos often, I just really wanted to give my 2 cents on this topic. So until next time, whenever that is...
Don't give up. Challenge again.